I stood in front of that mansion, my hands trembling on the steering wheel of my brand-new Rolls-Royce, watching through the window as my daughter-in-law's face turned ghost white. 2 weeks ago, she'd called me with that poisonous sweet voice. "Richard, we're having a charity gala Saturday night. I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if you came and shared your story? You know, the struggling poor man perspective. My friends would find it so educational to meet someone who's had to penny pinch their whole life. Wear that old suit with the shiny elbows. It'll be perfect for the authenticity we need." She wanted to parade me around like a circus animal, proof of how charitable she was for tolerating her husband's embarrassing poor father. The man who raised her husband alone, who worked 3 jobs to put him through college. I was now the family joke. What she didn't know was that 3 days after that call, I inherited $3 million from my brother. But I told no one, because tonight I was going to expose exactly who these people really were. Drop a comment with your state if you're watching from the US, and subscribe. What happened next changed everything. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the Rolls-Royce, my legs steadier than I expected. The valet, who'd been lounging against the gate, straightened up so fast he nearly dropped his clipboard. His eyes went wide as he looked from the car to me, then back to the car, like he couldn't process what he was seeing. "Good evening, sir," he stammered, practically running over to take my keys. I handed them to him with a calm smile, watching his hands shake as he held them. This was already better than I'd imagined. The front door was open, warm light and laughter spilling onto the marble steps. I could hear classical music, the clink of expensive glasses, the buzz of conversations where people talked about nothing important while pretending it mattered. My son Michael had grown up in a small house with creaky floors and a leaky roof. Now he lived here, in this monument to excess, with a woman who thought poverty was something quaint to discuss over champagne. I straightened my new tuxedo, custom-made, perfectly tailored, and walked toward the door. Every step felt like walking toward a reckoning. A young woman in a black dress and white apron stood at the entrance with a tray of champagne. She looked at me with that trained service smile, the one that never reaches the eyes. "Welcome, sir. May I offer you—" Then she stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes flickered past me to the Rolls-Royce, then to my face, and I saw the confusion there. She'd been briefed, I was sure of it. Victoria, my daughter-in-law, had probably told all the staff about the poor, embarrassing father-in-law who'd be arriving in his rusty pickup truck, the one they should politely escort to a corner where he wouldn't bother the important guests. "Thank you," I said, taking a glass of champagne. "Could you tell me where I might find Victoria and Michael?" She blinked twice, recovering her composure. "They're in the grand salon, sir. Through the foyer. Second door on your right." I nodded and walked past her, hearing her whisper urgently into a small radio on her wrist. The warning system had been activated. Richard was here, and something was very wrong with the script Victoria had written. The foyer was exactly what I'd expected. Crystal chandelier that probably cost more than I'd earned in 5 years of work. Marble floors so polished you could see your reflection. Fresh flowers in vases taller than my grandson. Paintings on the walls that screamed, "We have money and want you to know it." I remembered Michael as a boy, content with a baseball and a glove I'd saved 3 months to buy him. How had he ended up here, in this cold museum pretending to be a home? The grand salon doors were open, and I could see inside. About 50 people in evening wear, diamonds catching the light, men in tuxedos discussing stock portfolios and vacation homes. And there, in the center like a queen holding court, was Victoria. She wore a red dress that probably cost what I used to make in a year. Her blonde hair swept up in some complicated style, diamonds at her throat and wrists. She was laughing at something a silver-haired man was saying, her hand on his arm in that practiced way of hers. Then she saw me. The laughter died on her lips. Her face went through a fascinating series of expressions in about 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and then something that looked almost like fear. She actually took a step backward, bumping into the silver-haired man, who looked annoyed until he followed her gaze. I raised my champagne glass slightly in greeting. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. This was the woman who'd spent 3 months planning my humiliation, and she couldn't even speak. My son Michael appeared at her side, following her stare. He looked good, successful, healthy, well-fed. The boy I'd raised on mac and cheese and hot dogs now stood in a custom tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. For a moment, when our eyes met, I saw something flash across his face. Guilt? Shame? But Victoria's hand gripped his arm, her red nails digging in, and whatever I'd seen disappeared. He straightened his shoulders and started walking toward me, Victoria practically attached to his side. "Dad," Michael said, and his voice was carefully neutral. "You came. Not, 'I'm glad you came,' or 'It's good to see you.' Just, you came. Like it was a surprise. Like they'd been hoping I wouldn't show up despite the invitation." Victoria's smile was so forced it looked painful, her teeth clenched together like she was trying not to scream. "Richard, how unexpected. We thought you might be more comfortable coming by tomorrow for brunch instead." Her eyes kept darting to the doorway, probably looking for my imaginary beat-up truck. "I decided to accept your kind invitation after all," I said, taking a slow sip of champagne. "You said you wanted me to share my story with your friends. The struggling working-class perspective, I believe you called it?" Several people nearby had stopped their conversations and were openly staring now. Victoria's face flushed red, the color creeping up from her neck. "I don't think I phrased it quite that way," she said through her frozen smile. Michael's hand went to her back, a gesture I'd seen him do 100 times. Always supporting her, never questioning her. "Oh, but you did," I continued, keeping my voice pleasant and conversational. "You said your friends would find it educational to hear from someone who'd had to penny-pinch their whole life, that I should wear my old suit with the shiny elbows for authenticity." The people around us weren't even pretending not to listen anymore. A woman in an emerald green dress actually gasped softly. Victoria's jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. "Dad," Michael said quietly, "maybe we should talk about this privately." "Why?" I asked, looking at my son. "Your wife invited me here to discuss my poverty in front of her friends. Surely she won't mind if we have that conversation now." The room had gone completely quiet. Even the string quartet in the corner had stopped playing, the musicians looking confused about whether they should continue. Victoria looked like she wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow her whole. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, but her voice shook. "Perhaps we should start over. Would you like me to introduce you to some of our guests?" "I'd be delighted," I said. "But first, I should probably move my car. I wouldn't want to block anyone's exit." I pulled the Rolls-Royce keys from my pocket and held them up, letting them catch the light. "Your valet seemed a bit overwhelmed. Not used to parking cars like that, I suppose." The silence that followed was absolutely beautiful. Victoria stared at the keys like they were a snake that might bite her. Michael's face had gone pale. You drove—" "What?" he stammered. "A Rolls-Royce Phantom," I said casually. "The 2024 model. Beautiful car. Handles like a dream. Cost about $500,000. But when my brother Samuel died 3 weeks ago and left me his fortune, I thought, why not treat myself?" I could actually hear people inhaling sharply. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Michael looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Uncle Samuel?" he whispered. "He died? Why didn't you tell me?" "I called you 4 times, I said, and now my voice was harder. "Left 3 messages. You never called back. You were too busy, I suppose, planning this party." I gestured around the room. This lovely event, where I was supposed to be the evening's entertainment. The poor old fool who raised you alone after your mother died, who worked 3 jobs so you could go to college, who gave up everything. I was going to be your charity case, your proof of how generous you are. My voice cracked on the last word, and I wasn't acting anymore. Michael's face crumbled. "Dad, I didn't know." But Victoria cut him off, her voice sharp and desperate. "That's not fair, Richard. We invited you because you're family. We wanted to include you." I laughed then, and it was a bitter sound. "Include me? You told me to wear my shiny suit for authenticity. You said your friends would find it educational to see how the poor live. That's not inclusion, Victoria. That's humiliation disguised as charity." The emerald dress woman spoke up, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Is that true, Victoria? Did you really invite this man here to mock him?" Victoria spun toward her, panic in her eyes. "No, Margaret, that's not. He's taking it out of context." But Margaret's face had hardened. "I don't think he is. I've heard you talk about Michael's father before. You called him the embarrassment. You said he lived in a shack and drove a rust bucket. You laughed about it." Other voices joined in now, people murmuring, shifting uncomfortably. A tall man in a gray tuxedo stepped forward. "I'm Douglas Chen," he said, offering me his hand. "I'm on the board of several charities in the city. If what you're saying is true, this is appalling. Using someone's financial struggles as entertainment is exactly the kind of behavior we work to combat." I shook his hand, feeling the strength of his grip. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. It's good to know not everyone here shares the host's sense of humor." Victoria looked like she was going to be sick. Michael just stood there, frozen. "The truth is," I said, raising my voice so everyone could hear, "I came here tonight with two purposes. First, to see if my son would stand up for me when his wife tried to humiliate me in front of all of you. Second, to tell all of you exactly what kind of people you're celebrating with." I turned to Michael. "Your wife has been telling people I'm barely surviving, that I live in poverty, that I'm an embarrassment to your success. Has she ever mentioned that I turned down your money 3 times because I didn't need it? That I've been living modestly by choice?" Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "She said you were too proud to accept help." I nodded slowly. "Too proud. Not financially independent. Not secure. Just too proud." She twisted my self-sufficiency into a character flaw so she could pity me. "And you believed her." I looked around the room at all these wealthy people in their expensive clothes. My brother Samuel made his fortune in real estate. He never married, never had children. Last month he died of a heart attack in his office, alone, working until his last breath. He left everything to me. $3 million, 4 properties, investment portfolios. He left it all to me because, in his words, "Richard is the only person I know who never wanted anything from me except my company. And you know what the funny thing is?" I continued, my voice getting louder. "I would trade every penny of that inheritance for one honest conversation with my son. For one visit that wasn't cancelled at the last minute. For one phone call that wasn't just the obligatory check-in where you couldn't wait to hang up. But instead, I get invited to a party designed to humiliate me, to put me on display like some kind of cautionary tale about the dangers of not being ambitious enough." Tears were running down my face now, and I didn't try to hide them. Victoria found her voice, shrill and desperate. "You're ruining everything! We worked so hard on this party, and you're making a scene?" "I'm making a scene?" I laughed again, harsh and broken. "You invited your husband's father to mock him in front of strangers, and I'm making a scene?" Michael finally spoke, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Dad, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know she said those things to you. She told me she invited you because she wanted to make amends, to include you more in our lives." "And you believed her?" I asked. "After 3 years of her making little comments about my house, my clothes, my car, after all the times she forgot to invite me to family dinners, after she told your son, my grandson, that I was too busy to see him when I called every week asking to visit?" Michael's face went white. "She said you were too busy. You always said you were too busy." The pieces were falling into place now, and I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. "She's been lying to both of us. The room erupted in whispers now, people no longer trying to be discreet. Victoria looked around wildly, like a trapped animal searching for an exit. "This is ridiculous! Michael, tell him, tell them!" But Michael was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. "Did you tell Dad I was too busy to take his calls?" he asked slowly. "Did you tell my son that his grandfather didn't want to see him?" Victoria's silence was answer enough. Her face had gone from red to white, and she was shaking. Margaret, the woman in the emerald dress, turned to leave. "I'm sorry, Victoria, but I can't stay at a party hosted by someone who would do something like this. It's cruel, and it's beneath the standards I expect from people I associate with." She walked toward the door, and like a dam breaking, others followed. The silver-haired man shook his head in disgust. Douglas Chen handed me his card. "Mr. Hartwell, I'd like to talk to you about our foundation's work. You seem like the kind of man we need on our board." Within 5 minutes, half the room had emptied. Victoria was crying now, real tears, mascara running down her face. "Michael, do something. They're leaving. Our party, our reputation." But Michael wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, and in his eyes, I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who'd come running into my arms after school. The boy who'd said, "I love you, Dad," every single night before bed. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I was so stupid, so blind. I let her come between us." I wanted to hug him. God, I wanted to hold my son and tell him it was okay, that we could fix this. But there was still one more thing that needed to be said. "Michael, I need you to answer one question honestly. If I hadn't inherited this money, if I'd shown up here tonight in my old truck wearing my shiny suit like your wife planned, would you have stood up for me? Or would you have let her parade me around for her friends to laugh at?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and terrible. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Victoria, then at me, then at the floor. And in that hesitation, in those few seconds of silence, I had my answer. He wouldn't have. He'd become so accustomed to Victoria's treatment of me that he'd learned to accept it, to normalize it. I nodded slowly, feeling something break inside my chest. That's what I thought. I set my champagne glass down on a nearby table. I'm going to leave now, not because I'm ashamed or embarrassed, but because I've said what I came to say. "Dad, wait!" Michael reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "I love you, son. I always will. But I deserve better than this. I deserved better than being lied to and manipulated and kept away from my grandson. I deserved better than a daughter-in-law who saw me as a problem to be managed instead of a person to be respected." I looked at Victoria, who was still crying. "And you? I hope someday you understand that money and status mean nothing if you have to hurt people to maintain them." I walked toward the door, my head held high. The few remaining guests parted to let me pass, some of them nodding respectfully. As I reached the entrance, I heard Michael's voice behind me. "What about the inheritance? Are you going to—" I turned back one last time. "What about it? It's my money, Michael, not yours, not Victoria's, mine. Your mother and I struggled for years to give you everything, and we never asked for anything in return except your love and respect. Apparently, that was too much to ask." My voice softened. "If you want a relationship with me, a real one, you know where to find me. But it's going to be on my terms now. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more letting your wife decide whether I'm worthy of being part of your life." The valet brought the Rolls-Royce around, his eyes full of respect now instead of confusion. I tipped him $100 bill, more than Victoria probably tipped in a year, and got in. Through the window I could see Michael standing in the doorway, Victoria clinging to his arm, her carefully planned evening in ruins around her. I started the engine, feeling its powerful purr beneath me. As I drove away from that mansion, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I'd spent too many years looking back, wondering what I could have done differently. Tonight, I was looking forward, and for the first time in years, the road ahead looked clear. I drove for 20 minutes before I realized I had no idea where I was going. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, adrenaline and emotion making my whole body tremble. I pulled into an empty parking lot near the river and just sat there, engine running, watching the water reflect the city lights. What had I done? I'd just blown up my relationship with my only son in front of 50 people. The phone in my pocket started buzzing. Once, twice, 10 times. I knew without looking it was Michael. Part of me wanted to answer, to hear his voice, to believe his apologies. But the other part, the part that had been hurt too many times, kept my hand away from that phone. The buzzing stopped, then started again immediately. This time, it was a different pattern. A call, not a text. I pulled the phone out and saw Michael's name on the screen, along with a photo from 5 years ago when we'd gone fishing together. Before Victoria, before everything changed. My finger hovered over the answer button, but I couldn't do it. Not yet. Not while my chest still felt like it was caving in. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, the notification popped up. I told myself I wouldn't listen to it tonight, but my thumb had other ideas. I pressed play. "Dad?" Michael's voice was thick, like he'd been crying. "Dad, please pick up. Please. I know I don't deserve it, but please let me explain. Victoria's gone. She drove off somewhere. I don't know where. And everyone left. And the house is empty. And I need to talk to you. I need you to know I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Dad. Call me back, please." The desperation in his voice cracked something inside me. This was my boy, my son, the child I'd raised alone after his mother died. But he was also the man who'd let his wife push me out of his life. How do you reconcile those two truths? Before I could think better of it, I called him back. He answered before the first ring finished. "Dad? Dad, thank God. Where are you? Are you okay?" His words tumbled out in a rush. "I'm fine," I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I'm parked by the river. Just needed some air." There was silence on the other end, filled with everything we weren't saying. "Can I come to you?" Michael asked finally. "We need to talk. Really talk. Not with Victoria. Not with anyone else. Just you and me." I closed my eyes, feeling exhaustion wash over me. "Tomorrow. Come to my house tomorrow at 10. Tonight I need to be alone." "Okay," he said quickly. "Okay. Tomorrow at 10. Dad, I just want you to know—" But I hung up before he could finish. I wasn't ready for apologies yet. Wasn't ready for explanations or excuses or promises that things would be different. I needed time to think about what I wanted, what I deserved, what kind of relationship, if any, I could have with a son who'd let me become invisible. The drive home took 30 minutes, and every mile I thought about turning around, going back, making this easier for everyone. That's what I'd always done. Made it easier, smoothed things over, been the understanding one. My house looked small and dark when I pulled up, the Rolls-Royce almost comically oversized in the narrow driveway. This was the house where I'd raised Michael, where Sarah had died in our bedroom 12 years ago, where every room held memories of a family that no longer existed. I sat in the car for a long time, looking at the peeling paint on the front door, the overgrown garden Sarah had loved, the basketball hoop I'd installed when Michael was 8. This house had always been enough for me. Why hadn't it been enough for him? Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The TV remote on the arm of the couch, my reading glasses on the kitchen table, the photo of Sarah and Michael on the mantel, taken the summer before she got sick. I picked up the photo and traced Sarah's smile with my finger. "What would you do?" I asked her picture. "Would you be proud of me tonight? Or would you say, I went too far?" Sarah had always been the gentle one, the peacemaker. She would have found a way to fix this without the drama, without the public confrontation. But Sarah wasn't here, and I'd had to fight this battle alone. The phone rang at midnight. Not Michael this time, a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Hartwell, This is Douglas Chen. We met tonight at the party. His voice was warm, apologetic for the late hour. I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I wanted to reach out personally. What happened tonight was unconscionable, and I wanted you to know that several of us have already called Victoria and Michael to express our disappointment. That's not who we are as a community. I appreciate that, Mr. Chen, I said, sitting down heavily on the couch. Though I'm sure Victoria and Michael appreciate it less. He laughed, a genuine sound. Victoria has already called me 3 times, trying to explain the misunderstanding. I haven't answered. But that's not why I'm calling. I meant what I said about our foundation board. We work with families in crisis, and we could use someone with your perspective. Someone who understands what it's like to struggle, to sacrifice, to be dismissed by people who should value you. Would you consider meeting with me next week to discuss it? The offer caught me off guard. An hour ago, I'd been the family embarrassment. Now, a prominent businessman was asking me to join his foundation board. I'd like that, I heard myself say. But Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something. I didn't come to that party tonight to make connections or network. I came because I needed my son to see what his wife had done, what he'd allowed her to do. There was a pause, then Chen's voice came back thoughtful. I know, and that's exactly why I want you on our board. Too many wealthy people forget what matters. You haven't. After we hung up, I poured myself a whiskey, something I rarely did, and sat in the dark living room. The house felt different tonight, like something had shifted in its foundation. Tomorrow Michael would come, and we'd have the conversation we should have had 3 years ago when he first brought Victoria home. I'd known then, in my gut, that she looked at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. But I'd stayed quiet, because I wanted my son to be happy. I'd learned a hard lesson tonight. Staying quiet doesn't keep the peace. It just delays the explosion. I still can't believe what happened when Michael showed up the next morning. Leave a comment telling me if you think I was too harsh, or if you would have done the same thing. The sun came up at 6, but I'd been awake for hours, watching the sky change from black to gray to pink. I made coffee, burned toast, threw it away, and made more. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. At 9:30, I heard a car pull up outside. Not Michael's BMW, but an unfamiliar sedan. Through the window, I saw my grandson Tommy getting out of the passenger seat, and my heart nearly stopped. He was 12 now, tall and lanky, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Michael got out of the driver's side, and the two of them stood in the driveway for a moment, talking. Then Tommy looked toward the house, and even from this distance I could see he'd been crying. I opened the door before they could knock. Tommy stared at me for one long moment, then launched himself into my arms like he used to when he was small. "Grandpa," he sobbed into my shoulder. "Grandpa, Dad told me everything. He told me Mom lied about you being too busy. He told me you called every week and she said you were working. Grandpa, I thought you didn't want to see me." His whole body shook with crying, and I held him tight, my own tears falling into his hair. Over his head, I saw Michael's face crumble. My son was crying too, silent tears tracking down his cheeks. "I always wanted to see you," I whispered to Tommy. "Every single day. I missed you so much." We stood like that for a long time, the 3 of us on my front porch, crying together. Finally, Tommy pulled back and wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "Mom's gone," he said, his voice small. "He packed a bunch of stuff and left last night. She told Dad he had to choose between you and her, and Dad said he chose you. Then she screamed a lot and left. Is she coming back?" I looked at Michael, who shook his head slightly. "I don't know, buddy," I told Tommy honestly. "But whatever happens, your dad and I are going to figure this out. Come inside. I'll make you breakfast." The kitchen felt warm and alive in a way it hadn't in years, with Tommy sitting at the table talking non-stop about school and baseball and everything he'd wanted to tell me for the past 3 years. Michael leaned against the counter, just watching us, and I could see the guilt and regret in every line of his body. While Tommy devoured scrambled eggs and actually not burned toast, Michael and I kept exchanging glances. We both knew we needed to talk, really talk, but neither of us knew how to start with Tommy there. Finally, Tommy pushed his plate away and looked at both of us. "Can I say something?" he asked, suddenly serious. "Of course," Michael and I said at the same time. Tommy took a deep breath. "I heard you guys fighting last night. I heard Mom screaming that Grandpa was trying to ruin our family. But Grandpa didn't ruin anything. Mom did. She lied to me. She lied to you, Dad. She made me think my own grandpa didn't love me anymore." His voice cracked. "I cried so many times because I thought Grandpa forgot about me. I thought maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe that's why he stopped calling." The words hit me like physical blows, and I had to grip the counter to stay standing. "And the worst part," Tommy continued, tears streaming down his face again, "is that you let her do it, Dad. Grandpa called, and you didn't make sure I got to talk to him. You just believed Mom when she said he was busy. You should have known better. You should have protected me from her lies." Michael's face had gone white. His son, his 12-year-old son, was holding him accountable in a way he needed to hear. "You're right," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're absolutely right. I failed you. I failed both of you. I got so caught up in making Victoria happy, in keeping peace in our marriage, that I lost sight of what really mattered." Tommy stood up and walked over to me, taking my hand. "I don't care if we have to live in a small house like this one. I don't care if we don't have a mansion or fancy parties. I just want my grandpa back, and I want a dad who doesn't let his wife be mean to people." The simple clarity of his words cut through all the complexity Michael and I had been dancing around. This wasn't about money or pride or even Victoria's cruelty. It was about family, about the bonds that should have been unbreakable but had been worn thin by lies and neglect. "You've got your grandpa back," I told Tommy, squeezing his hand. "I promise you that. Nothing and no one is ever going to keep us apart again." Michael cleared his throat. "Tommy, would you mind giving Grandpa and me a few minutes alone? You could watch TV in the living room." Tommy looked between us, then nodded. "Okay, but Dad, don't mess this up." He left the kitchen, and the silence that followed was deafening. Michael pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, his hands covering his face. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red and swollen. "I don't even know where to start," he said. "How do I apologize for 3 years of being blind? How do I explain letting my wife poison my relationship with you and my son?" "You start by being honest," I said, sitting across from him. "Not the polite version, not the version that makes you look better. The real truth." Michael nodded slowly. "The truth is, Victoria made me feel important in a way I'd never felt before. She came from this wealthy family. She moved in these elite circles, and she chose me. Part of me was always worried she'd realize I grew up poor, that my dad was just a bus driver, that I didn't really belong in her world. So when she started making comments about you, about your house, your clothes, your truck, I didn't defend you because defending you felt like admitting I came from nothing. The honesty of it was brutal, but it was what we needed. I was ashamed," Michael continued, his voice breaking. "Not of you, but of where I came from. And instead of dealing with that, I let Victoria create this narrative where you were the problem, not my insecurity. She'd say things like, 'Your father could take better care of himself if he wanted to,' or 'He chooses to live like that.' And I'd nod along because it was easier than admitting the truth, that you lived modestly because you gave everything you had to raise me." He was crying openly now, not trying to hide it. "And then I let her lie about your calls. I let her keep Tommy away from you. I became exactly the kind of man you taught me never to be." I reached across the table and took his hand, feeling the calluses that had softened over years of office work. "Why didn't you ever ask me if I needed help? Why did you assume I was too proud?" Michael wiped his eyes with his free hand. Because Victoria convinced me that offering help would insult you. She'd say, "Your father has his pride. Don't embarrass him by treating him like a charity case." And I believed her because it was convenient. It meant I didn't have to acknowledge that you'd sacrificed your own comfort for decades to give me opportunities you never had. It was easier to think you were just stubborn than to face my own guilt. "And the inheritance," I said quietly. "What were you thinking when you asked about it last night?" Michael flinched like I'd hit him. "That was instinct. Victoria's been in my ear for years about your father's estate, and making sure we're protected, and he owes you after all you've done for him." In that moment, standing there watching you leave, I reverted to being her puppet instead of your son. I'm ashamed of that. I'm ashamed of all of it. He pulled his hand back and stood up, pacing the small kitchen. The worst part is, I don't even know who I am anymore. Am I the guy who grew up in this house learning about integrity and hard work? Or am I the guy who married into wealth and forgot where he came from? That's something you have to figure out, I told him. I can't answer that for you. But I can tell you this. The Michael I raised would never have let anyone treat his father the way Victoria treated me. The Michael I raised would have stood up for what was right, even if it cost him something. That Michael still exists somewhere inside you. You just have to decide if you want to find him again, or if the mansion and the country club are worth more than your integrity. My words hung in the air between us, heavy and challenging. Michael stopped pacing and looked at me. Last night, after everyone left and Victoria was screaming at me, she said I had to choose, her or you. And in that moment, it was the clearest decision I've ever made. I chose you. I will always choose you. I told her if she couldn't respect my father, if she couldn't admit what she'd done and genuinely apologize, then we had nothing left to talk about. She packed her things and left. Drove to her parents' house. This morning, she called and said she wanted a divorce. He said it flatly, without emotion, like he was reading a weather report. "And how do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. Michael was quiet for a long time. "Relieved," he finally said. "Terrified, because I don't know how to tell Tommy his parents are splitting up. Angry at myself for wasting 3 years with someone who brought out the worst in me. But mostly relieved." Last night, after she left, I sat in that big empty mansion and realized I'd never been happy there. Not really. It was all performance, all pretending to be someone I'm not. I'd rather live in this house with you and Tommy, eating burnt toast and driving a rust bucket, than spend another day in that mansion lying to myself about who I am. Tommy appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to listen, but the TV's not that loud," and he trailed off, looking anxious. "Are you guys okay?" Michael opened his arms, and Tommy walked into them. "We're going to be okay," Michael said firmly. "It's going to be hard, and things are going to change, but we're going to be okay because we have each other. Right, Dad?" He looked at me over Tommy's head, and in his eyes I saw the boy he used to be, the one who believed his father could fix anything. "Right," I agreed. "We have each other. That's what matters." The phone rang then, shattering the moment. Michael's face went pale when he saw the caller ID. "It's Victoria's lawyer," he said. "Already?" The speed of it shocked me. Victoria wasn't wasting any time making this official. "Answer it," I told him. "Whatever she's planning, we need to know." Michael put the phone on speaker. A smooth male voice filled the kitchen. "Mr. Hartwell, this is James Rodriguez, from Rodriguez and Associates. I'm calling on behalf of your wife, Victoria. She's asked me to inform you that she's filing for divorce and will be seeking full custody of your son Thomas, as well as the marital home, half your assets, and alimony. Given your father's interference in your marriage last night, she believes—" "Stop," Michael said, his voice hard in a way I'd never heard before. "My father didn't interfere in my marriage. My wife's lies and manipulations destroyed it. Tell Victoria if she wants to fight for custody, we'll see her in court. And tell her I have a list of 50 witnesses who saw her admit to lying about keeping my son away from his grandfather." I'm sure a judge will be very interested in that pattern of parental alienation. There was silence on the other end. Then Rodriguez's voice came back more cautious. Mr. Hartwell, perhaps we should discuss this more calmly. There's nothing to discuss, Michael interrupted. Have your client contact my lawyer. We'll handle everything through official channels. And one more thing. Tell Victoria she's not getting Tommy. She's not using my son as a weapon. She's not poisoning him against his family anymore. That ends now. He hung up without waiting for a response. His hands were shaking, but his jaw was set. I should have done that 3 years ago, he said quietly. Should have shut her down the first time she said something cruel about you. Should have protected Tommy from her manipulation. Should have been the man you raised me to be. Tommy hugged his father tighter. You're being that man now, Dad. That's what counts. Out of the mouths of babes, as Sarah used to say. My grandson had more wisdom at 12 than most people developed in a lifetime. What happens now? I asked, because someone had to be practical. Michael took a deep breath. Now we hire a lawyer, a good one, and we document everything. Every lie Victoria told, every time she kept Tommy from you, every witness from last night who can testify about what she admitted. We fight for custody, and we don't back down. His voice grew stronger with each word. And then maybe Tommy and I find a smaller house, something we can actually afford without Victoria's family money, something that feels like a home instead of a showroom. Or, I said slowly, you and Tommy could stay here, with me. This house has 4 bedrooms. It's paid off, and honestly, it's been too quiet since you left. Michael's eyes filled with tears again. Dad, we can't impose on you like that. After everything I've done. But I cut him off. You're not imposing. You're coming home. Both of you. This is where you belong. Where you've always belonged. And this time, we're going to build something real. No lies, no pretenses, no trying to be something we're not. Just family. Like it should have been all along. Tommy let out a whoop of joy. Really? We can live here? Can I have my old room back? The one with the glow-in-the-dark stars? His excitement was infectious, and despite everything, I found myself laughing. It's still there, buddy. Still waiting for you. Michael pulled me into a hug, and the 3 of us stood in that kitchen. 3 generations of Hartwell men, finally finding our way back to each other. Thank you, Michael whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for showing me last night what I'd become. Thank you for being the father I forgot how to be. The rest of the day was a blur of activity. Michael and Tommy drove to the mansion to pack their essential belongings, while I started preparing the bedrooms. As I made up the bed in what would be Michael's room, I heard a car pull up outside. Through the window, I saw it was Margaret, the woman in the emerald dress from the party. She got out carrying a casserole dish and walked purposefully to my front door. I met her on the porch, confused. Mr. Hartwell, she said warmly, I hope you don't mind my stopping by. I got your address from the charity gala invitation list. I wanted to bring you this. It's my grandmother's recipe, and to apologize. Apologize? I took the casserole dish automatically. For what? Margaret's expression was serious. For not speaking up sooner. Victoria's been part of our social circle for 3 years, and I've heard her make cruel comments about you before. I always felt uncomfortable about it. But I never said anything. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I didn't want to cause drama. Last night, watching you stand up for yourself, I realized my silence made me complicit in her cruelty. I should have called her out years ago. I should have defended you, even though we'd never met. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I set the casserole dish down and took her hand. Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. But you're here now. You left the party. You made it clear where you stand. That takes courage. Margaret smiled, relieved. Still, I wanted to make amends. And I wanted you to know that Victoria's social standing in our community is finished. After last night, at least 15 families have made it clear they won't associate with her anymore. What she did was beyond the pale. You don't treat family like that. especially not someone who sacrificed so much for his child. She squeezed my hand. Your son is lucky to have you. I hope he realizes that now. After Margaret left, I sat on the porch waiting for Michael and Tommy to return, thinking about how much had changed in 24 hours. Yesterday, I'd been the family embarrassment, invisible and dismissed. Today, I was surrounded by people who saw my worth, not because of the inheritance, but because they'd witnessed me standing up for myself with dignity. The Rolls-Royce sat in the driveway, a symbol of the fortune I'd unexpectedly gained. But sitting here on this sagging porch, waiting for my son and grandson to come home, I realized the real fortune was this: family that chose to be together, honest and flawed, and trying to do better. That was worth more than all of Samuel's millions. When Michael and Tommy pulled up with the borrowed sedan loaded with boxes and suitcases, I stood up to help them unload. Tommy bounded out of the car, his arms full of video games and books. "Grandpa, Dad says we can paint my room any color I want. Can we do it together? Like a project?" His enthusiasm was intoxicating, reminding me of when Michael was that age, and every moment together was an adventure. "Absolutely," I told him. "We'll go to the hardware store tomorrow, and you can pick out whatever color you want." As Tommy raced inside with his treasures, Michael came to stand beside me, looking at the house with new eyes. "I forgot how good it feels to come home to this place," he said quietly. Victoria always called it the shack, said it was embarrassing. But looking at it now, all I can see is every memory we made here. Mom reading to me on that porch. You teaching me to ride a bike in that driveway. The Christmas we strung lights on every surface because Mom loved them so much. His voice grew thick. This is where I learned what love actually looks like. Not performance, not pretense, just showing up every day and doing your best. I lost sight of that, but I found it again, Dad. I found my way back. We started carrying boxes inside, and with each load, the house felt more alive. Tommy's laughter echoed from upstairs. The smell of Margaret's casserole warmed the kitchen. Michael's voice called out asking where to put his clothes. This was the home I'd protected all these years, and finally, it was filled with the people it was always meant to hold. The party last night had been meant to humiliate me, to put me in my place. Instead, it had set us all free. Victoria had shown her true colors. Michael had remembered his, and Tommy had gotten his grandfather back. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected packages, wrapped in pain but delivering something precious. That night, after Tommy was asleep and Michael had retired to his room, I stood in the doorway looking at my sleeping grandson. His room hadn't changed much. Still the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, still the baseball posters on the walls, but the boy in the bed was different from the one who'd left 3 years ago. Older, hurt by adult cruelties, but resilient, just like his father, just like me. I thought about all the calls Victoria had blocked, all the visits she'd prevented, all the time I'd lost with this boy. The anger tried to rise up again, but I pushed it down. Anger wouldn't give us back those lost years. All we could do was make sure we didn't waste any more time. Starting tomorrow, we'd build new memories strong enough to overshadow the pain. The custody battle lasted 3 months, and they were 3 months I wouldn't wish on anyone. Victoria hired the most expensive divorce attorney in the state, a shark named Gerald Winters, who specialized in destroying fathers in court. But what Victoria didn't count on was that 50 people from her party had witnessed her admit to lying about keeping Tommy from me. Douglas Chen personally testified about what he'd heard. Margaret brought 10 other society women who corroborated every detail. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Henderson, listened to it all with an increasingly disgusted expression. The breaking point came when Victoria's own mother took the stand. Mrs. Albright was a dignified woman in her 70s who'd always been polite but distant to me. She sat in the witness box, looked directly at her daughter, and said, "I taught Victoria better than this. I taught her that family comes first, that cruelty has no place in a civilized society, that money doesn't make you better than anyone else. Somewhere along the way, she forgot those lessons, or chose to ignore them. Either way, I cannot in good conscience support her in this case. That little boy deserves to be with people who will teach him kindness and integrity. Victoria actually gasped in the courtroom. Her own mother had just sided with us. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, and I could feel him trembling. Judge Henderson called for a recess, and when we returned an hour later, her decision was swift and final. Joint custody, with primary residence with the father. Mrs. Hartwell may see Thomas every other weekend, provided she undergoes family counseling and can demonstrate a pattern of honest, respectful behavior. This court does not look kindly on parental alienation, and the evidence presented here is among the most clear-cut I've seen in 30 years on the bench. Victoria stood up, her face white with rage. "This is ridiculous! I'm his mother! You can't just—" But Judge Henderson cut her off with a look that could freeze fire. "Mrs. Hartwell, I suggest you sit down and accept this decision gracefully, or I'll hold you in contempt. You systematically lied to your child about his grandfather for 3 years. You manipulated your husband, alienated his family, and admitted to planning a public humiliation of an elderly man who had done nothing to deserve it. You're lucky I'm allowing you any custody at all." Victoria's lawyer put a hand on her arm, and she sat down, trembling with fury. Outside the courthouse, Michael pulled both Tommy and me into a fierce hug. "It's over," he kept saying. "It's finally over." Tommy was crying, but they were tears of relief. "Does this mean I don't have to go live with Mom?" he asked. "You'll visit her," Michael explained gently. "But yes, you're staying with Grandpa and me. We're a family, and nobody's going to split us up again." Tommy buried his face in my shirt, and I held him tight, feeling 3 years of tension finally release from my body. We'd won, not just the legal battle, but the war for our family's soul. That night, we celebrated at my kitchen table with pizza and root beer, Tommy's choice. He was laughing, really laughing, in a way I hadn't seen since he was small. "Grandpa, can I tell you something?" he asked between bites. "When Mom's lawyer asked me who I wanted to live with, I told him the truth. I said I wanted to live with people who don't lie to me. That shut him up real fast." Michael and I exchanged glances over his head. Our boy had learned to stand up for himself, to value honesty over comfort. That was worth more than any inheritance. The weeks that followed brought more changes. Michael got a job at a mid-sized accounting firm, not as prestigious as his position at Victoria's father's company, but honest work that he earned on his own merit. He came home tired but satisfied, without the constant anxiety that had marked his years with Victoria. Tommy joined the local Little League, and I went to every single game, cheering louder than any other grandfather there. We painted his room electric blue, just like he wanted, and spent a whole weekend getting more paint on ourselves than on the walls. Douglas Chen made good on his offer, and I joined the board of his foundation. My first project was establishing a support program for elderly people who'd been alienated from their families. We called it Breaking the Silence, and within 2 months, we'd helped reconnect 17 grandparents with their grandchildren. Each reunion reminded me of that moment on my porch when Tommy flew into my arms. Each story of reconciliation healed a little more of the wound Victoria had left. I was turning my pain into purpose, just like Sarah would have wanted. Victoria, to everyone's surprise, did go to counseling. Her first visit with Tommy after the custody ruling was supervised at a neutral location, and according to the mediator, she actually apologized. She cried, Tommy told me afterward. Real crying, not the fake kind she used to do to get what she wanted. She said she was sorry for lying about you, that she was wrong, that she'd been jealous of how close we were, and tried to break that so I'd need her more. It was weird, Grandpa. She actually seemed like a real person for once. I asked Tommy how he felt about that. He thought for a long moment. I'm glad she said sorry. But sorry doesn't give me back 3 years. Sorry doesn't make me forget all the times I cried because I thought you didn't love me anymore. Maybe someday I'll forgive her. But right now, I'm just tired of thinking about it. I just want to be here with you and Dad and be happy. Wise beyond his years, my grandson. Forgiveness would come in its own time. Or maybe it wouldn't. Either way, he knew his worth now. Nobody could take that from him again. The mansion sold 6 months later. Victoria's parents bought it from Michael for a fair price. They were decent people, embarrassed by their daughter's behavior, trying to make amends where they could. Michael took his half of the proceeds and did something that surprised me. He donated a quarter of it to the foundation, put another quarter in a college fund for Tommy, and used the rest to renovate our house. Not to make it fancy, but to make it sturdy. New roof, new plumbing, fresh paint. This house took care of me, he explained. Now I'm taking care of it. The Rolls-Royce sat in the driveway for months, barely driven. It had served its purpose, a symbol of the surprise reversal, the trump card I'd played when Victoria expected me to arrive broken and poor. But it wasn't me. One Saturday, Tommy and I were washing it together, and he asked, "Grandpa, why do you keep this fancy car when you never drive it?" I looked at the gleaming chrome and realized he was right. This car represented Samuel's world, not mine. "You know what?" I said. "Let's sell it. We'll get something practical. Maybe a good used truck, something we can actually use." We sold the Rolls-Royce for $400,000, and I did something that felt right. I split it 3 ways, a third to the foundation, a third to a scholarship fund in Sarah's name at the community college, and a third into a trust for Tommy that he'd get when he turned 25. Michael tried to protest the trust, saying it was too much, but I cut him off. This is Samuel's money doing what it should have done from the start, building something lasting for the next generation, not buying status or impressing people who don't matter. Your son is going to have opportunities we never dreamed of, and he's going to appreciate them because he's learned what matters. A year after the custody battle, Victoria remarried, a lawyer from her father's firm, someone as polished and ambitious as she'd wanted Michael to be. Tommy met him once and came home unimpressed. He's okay, I guess, but he calls me sport and talks to me like I'm 5. And he doesn't really listen when I talk, not like you guys do. We didn't badmouth Victoria or her new husband, that wasn't our way. But we didn't pretend Tommy had to force a relationship there either. He'd see his mother on scheduled weekends, be polite, and come home to the people who actually knew him. The second year brought healing in unexpected ways. Michael started dating again, cautiously. A teacher named Ellen who worked at Tommy's school. She was kind and genuine, with laugh lines around her eyes and a sensible car. The first time she came to dinner, she brought homemade cookies and asked if she could see photos of Sarah. "I want to know about the woman who shaped this family," she said simply. Michael's eyes filled with tears, and I knew this one was different. This one understood what mattered. Tommy approved of her immediately, especially when she joined us for baseball games and cheered just as loud as we did. But the most profound healing came from an unexpected source. One evening, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Victoria standing there, alone, without makeup, looking smaller somehow. "Richard," she said quietly, "I know I have no right to ask this, but could we talk? Just for a few minutes?" Michael appeared behind me, tense, protective. "It's okay," I told him. "We can talk on the porch." We sat in the old rocking chairs Sarah and I had bought at a yard sale 30 years ago, and Victoria stared at her hands for a long time. "I've been in therapy for 8 months now," she finally said. "Real therapy, not the court-mandated kind. And I'm starting to understand how damaged I was, how damaged I still am. I grew up in a house where love was conditional, where your worth was measured by your accomplishments and your status. My parents loved me, but only when I was perfect, only when I made them look good." Her voice cracked. When I met Michael, he was this diamond in the rough, smart, ambitious, from humble beginnings, and I saw him as a project, someone I could polish and present to my world as proof of my good taste, my charitable nature. But that's not love, she continued, tears streaming down her face now. That's not partnership. That's what my parents did to me, and I did it to Michael. And worse, I did it to you. You represented everything I was running from, the idea that you could be happy without wealth, without status, without impressing anyone. You terrified me because you were proof that my entire value system was empty. So I tried to erase you, tried to make you invisible so I wouldn't have to confront my own superficiality. She looked at me finally, her eyes raw with genuine remorse. I can't take back what I did. I can't give Tommy back those 3 years. But I needed you to know I see it now. I see how cruel I was, how calculated, how absolutely wrong. I rocked in my chair, listening to the evening crickets, thinking about Sarah and what she would say. Victoria, I appreciate you telling me this. I do. But here's the thing about apologies. They're meaningless without change. You can be sorry all you want, but what matters is who you become after the sorry. Are you going to keep being the woman who measures worth by dollar signs? Or are you going to figure out who you are without all the trappings? She nodded slowly. I don't know yet. That's the honest answer. But I'm trying. I'm really trying. And I wanted you to know that what happened at that party, it was the worst thing I've ever done, but also maybe the most important, because it broke something in me that needed to break. We sat in silence for a while. Then Victoria stood to leave. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being the kind of grandfather Tommy needs. He's a good kid. You and Michael. You're doing a great job with him. She paused at the steps. I know I don't get to be part of this family the way I wanted to be, but I hope someday I can at least be someone Tommy doesn't flinch away from. Someone who adds something positive to his life, instead of just pain and confusion. I nodded. That's up to you, Victoria. The door's not locked, but you have to earn your way through it. No shortcuts this time. After she left, Michael came out to the porch. What did she want? I told him about the conversation, and he listened quietly. Do you think she means it? He asked. I think she wants to mean it, I replied. Whether she can actually change, that's something only time will tell. But holding on to anger won't help any of us. We can be cautious without being cruel, protective without being vindictive. We can acknowledge her apology without forgetting what she did. That's what being the bigger person actually means. Michael sat in the chair Victoria had vacated. When did you get so wise, Dad? I laughed. Around the same time you got smart enough to come home. 3 years after that fateful party, Tommy turned 15. We threw him a birthday party at the house. Nothing fancy, just family and close friends, hot dogs on the grill, a store-bought cake with too much frosting. Ellen was there, now Michael's fiancée, fitting into our family like she'd always been there. Douglas, Chen, and Margaret came, bringing gifts and genuine affection. Even Victoria's parents showed up, tentatively, trying to build bridges with their grandson. Victoria wasn't invited. That was Tommy's choice, but she sent a card with a thoughtful message and a check for his college fund. Progress, in its own way. As the sun set and everyone sang happy birthday, I looked around at the faces gathered in my backyard. This wasn't the family I'd imagined 3 years ago when I was alone in this house, cut off from my son and grandson, believing I'd failed somehow. This was something better. A family built on honesty, on conscious choice, on respect earned rather than demanded. We'd been broken, but we'd put ourselves back together stronger than before. The cracks were still visible, reminders of what we'd survived, but they no longer defined us. Tommy blew out his candles and made a wish. Later, as we cleaned up, I asked him what he'd wished for. You're not supposed to tell, Grandpa, or it won't come true. But he smiled and added, though honestly, I can't think of anything I need. I've got everything that matters right here. 15 years old and already understanding what took me 72 years to fully grasp. That family isn't about perfection, and love isn't about performance. It's about showing up, being honest, and choosing each other again and again, especially when it's hard. Michael found me sitting on the porch after everyone had left, watching the stars come out. "You okay, Dad?" I nodded, feeling a contentment I'd thought was lost forever. "Better than okay. I was just thinking about that night 3 years ago when I drove up in that Rolls-Royce. I was so angry, so hurt, so determined to prove I wasn't the pathetic old man Victoria thought I was." I turned to look at my son. "But you know what? The car didn't prove anything. The money didn't change anything. What changed everything was deciding I deserved better, standing up for myself, drawing a line and saying, 'No more.' You taught me that," Michael said softly. "You taught me that night what real strength looks like. Not money, not status, not impressing people at fancy parties. Real strength is knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it." He put his arm around my shoulders. "I was so lost, Dad. I'd become someone I didn't recognize, chasing a version of success that left me empty. And you pulled me back. You saved me." I shook my head. "You saved yourself, son. I just reminded you who you really were. The rest was your choice, your courage." We sat in comfortable silence, the kind only possible between people who've been through hell together and come out the other side. Finally, Michael spoke again. "Ellen asked me to ask you something. She's nervous to bring it up herself." I smiled. "She wants to get married here, doesn't she? In the backyard?" Michael laughed. "How did you know?" "Because this is home. This is where real things happen, where real life is lived. Of course she wants to start her marriage here." I squeezed his shoulder. "Tell her yes. Tell her I'd be honored. Your mother would have loved her, you know. She has Sarah's kindness, that same genuine warmth." The wedding happened 6 months later, small and perfect. Tommy was the best man, standing tall and proud in his first real suit. Victoria came, at Tommy's request, and sat quietly in the back, crying tears that seemed genuine. Her new husband didn't come. They were separated, apparently. Some patterns are hard to break, but she behaved with grace and dignity, congratulated Ellen sincerely, and left without causing drama. Maybe she really was changing. Or maybe she'd just learned to hide it better. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I'd learned to let go of things I couldn't control. As Michael and Ellen exchanged vows in the shadow of Sarah's garden, now lovingly restored and maintained by all of us, I felt my late wife's presence. She would have loved this moment. Her son finding real love, her grandson thriving, her husband finally at peace. The house was filled with laughter and music and joy, the way it was always meant to be. This was the life she'd wanted for us. It had just taken me longer than expected to find my way back to it, but Sarah was patient. She always had been. I could almost hear her voice. "You did good, Richard. You did real good." After the wedding, after the guests left, and the newlyweds drove off for their honeymoon, Tommy helped me clean up the backyard. We worked in comfortable silence, picking up chairs and stacking plates. "Grandpa," he said suddenly, "remember 3 years ago when you showed up at that party in the Rolls-Royce?" I nodded, curious where this was going. I was thinking about that story. Dad told me the whole thing, and I realized something. The real power move wasn't the fancy car. It was you refusing to be treated like garbage. It was you standing up and saying, "I deserve respect." That's what changed everything. I stopped what I was doing and really looked at my grandson. At 15, he was almost as tall as I was, with Michael's eyes and Sarah's smile. "You're right," I told him. "The car was just transportation. The money was just paper. What mattered was deciding I wouldn't accept being diminished anymore. And you know what? That's a lesson you get to learn now instead of at 72. You get to go through life knowing your worth from the start. That's my real gift to you. Not money in a trust fund, but the knowledge that you never have to accept being treated as less than you are. Tommy hugged me then. A real hug. Tight and genuine. Love you, Grandpa. Love you too, kid. We finished cleaning as the stars came out. The same stars I'd looked at 3 years ago after that party, not knowing what would come next. If someone had told me then that I'd end up here, my family restored, new relationships built, a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years, I might not have believed them. But here I was. Here we all were. Broken pieces put back together in a pattern more beautiful than the original. Late that night, alone in my room, I took out the last letter Samuel had left me. I'd found it months after the funeral, tucked into a book he'd given me years ago. His handwriting was shaky, written near the end. Richard, if you're reading this, you've gotten my money. Don't waste it trying to buy love or respect. You already have both from the people who matter. Use it to build something real, something lasting. Use it to teach your family what our parents taught us, that character matters more than cash, that integrity trumps status, that the richest man is the one surrounded by people who love him for who he is, not what he has. You're already that man, brother. You always have been. Much love, Samuel. I folded the letter carefully and put it back. Samuel was right. I'd always been rich in the ways that mattered. Rich in love, in integrity, in the strength to stand up for myself when it counted. The money had just given me a tool to reveal the truth, to force confrontations that needed to happen, to clear away the lies and manipulation so we could rebuild on solid ground. $3 million had given me back my family, but not by buying them, by showing them what real wealth looked like, by teaching them, teaching all of us, what actually mattered. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices in the kitchen. Tommy was telling Ellen about his baseball game. Michael was laughing at something on his phone, and someone had burned toast. Again. The familiar smell made me smile. This was my life now. Messy, imperfect, real. This was everything I'd fought for that night 3 years ago when I decided I deserved better. This was what it meant to stand up for yourself, to refuse to be diminished, to know your worth and demand that others recognize it too. I got out of bed, put on my old robe, and shuffled toward the kitchen. Through the doorway, I could see my family, my son, my grandson, my future daughter-in-law, and I felt a profound gratitude. Not for the inheritance, though it had its uses. Not for the Rolls-Royce that had delivered such sweet justice, but for the courage I'd found somewhere deep inside me to say, enough. That courage had saved us all. It had torn down the facade and forced us to rebuild something authentic. It had cost us pain and struggle, but it had given us back to each other. "Morning, Grandpa," Tommy called out, seeing me in the doorway. "Dad burned the toast again." Michael held up the blackened bread sheepishly. In my defense, I was distracted by Ellen's terrible joke about accountants. Ellen swatted his arm, laughing. It was a great joke. They were bickering good-naturedly, the way families do when they're comfortable with each other. I poured myself coffee and sat at the table that had witnessed so much. Sarah's death, Michael's betrayal, Victoria's lies, and finally, our reconciliation. This table had seen it all, and it was still standing, just like us. "So," I said, taking a sip of coffee, "what's everyone doing today?" Tommy launched into a detailed description of his baseball practice schedule. Ellen mentioned a summer reading program she was organizing at school. Michael talked about a new client at work. Normal, everyday conversations about normal, everyday things. This was what I'd been missing during those 3 years of alienation. Not grand gestures or fancy parties, but the small moments of connection that make up a real life. The jokes over burned toast, the casual updates about the day ahead, the comfortable silence between people who know each other deeply. That's my story. The story of how I went from being the family embarrassment to reclaiming my dignity. The story of how a cruel party invitation became the catalyst for saving my family from itself. The story of how $3 million taught us that real wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts. My daughter-in-law tried to humiliate me, and instead, she freed us all from the prison of pretense and performance. She tried to prove I was worthless, and instead, she forced everyone to see what real worth looks like. In trying to destroy me, she gave me back my family. Sometimes justice comes in the strangest packages. That's my story. What do you think? Would you have done the same thing? Would you have shown up at that party? Or would you have stayed away? Leave me a comment. I read every one. Give this video a like if you're glad I fought for my family. And subscribe, because I have many more stories like this to share with you. Stories about real people, real struggles, and real triumph. Stories about knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Now, go hug the people who matter to you and never take them for granted. Life's too short for anything else.